There's a moment that happens to almost every trader, and it happens more than once. You sit there after the market closes, staring at your screen, and you realize you did it again. You broke your own rule. You held too long. You entered too early. You doubled down when you said you wouldn't. And the strangest part is that you knew better. While you were doing it, somewhere in your mind, you knew. But you did it anyway. That feeling sitting in your chest right now as I say this, that's what I want to talk to you about today. Not the technical mistakes, not the strategy errors, but the deeper question underneath all of it. Why do you trade against your own plan? Why do you betray the very system you built to protect yourself? This isn't about discipline in the way most people talk about it. It's not about willpower or grinding harder or writing your rules on a sticky note. This is about something more fundamental happening inside you, something that most traders never really understand about themselves. And until you understand it, you'll keep repeating the same pattern, no matter how many times you promise yourself you won't. Let me start by saying something that might surprise you. When you trade against your plan, you're not being weak. You're not broken. You're actually doing something that makes perfect sense once you understand what's really happening. Your brain is trying to protect you. It's trying to give you something you need. The problem is that what your brain thinks you need and what you actually need are two completely different things. Think about the last time you broke your rule. Really think about it. What was happening in the moments before? Most traders will say they got emotional, or they got greedy, or they got scared. And yes, those feelings were there. But underneath those feelings was something else. There was a thought. There was a belief operating in that moment that felt absolutely true. It might have been as simple as, this time is different, or I can't afford to miss this, or I need to make back what I lost. In that moment, that thought felt like reality. It felt like the truth, and so you acted on it. Here's what's important to understand. That thought, that belief, it didn't come from nowhere. It came from a part of you that's trying to solve a problem. Maybe it's trying to solve the problem of feeling behind. Maybe it's trying to solve the problem of feeling like you're not good enough yet. Maybe it's trying to prove something to yourself or to someone else. Maybe it's trying to avoid the discomfort of being wrong or the pain of missing out. Whatever it is, there's a need underneath the action. And until you see that need clearly, you can't change the pattern. Most traders approach this problem backwards. They try to control their behavior through force, through rules and consequences and promises. And for a while, it might work. You might white-knuckle your way through a few trades, but eventually the need comes back, the pressure builds, and you break again, because you never addressed what was actually driving the behavior in the first place. Let me describe something you might recognize. You have a losing trade. Your plan says cut it. You know you should cut it, but you don't. You hold it, and it gets worse. And now you're not just dealing with the loss, you're dealing with the fact that you didn't follow your rule. So now there's shame on top of the loss, and that shame makes you want to fix it even more. So you take another trade, one you shouldn't take, trying to make it back, trying to erase what just happened. And maybe it works, or maybe it doesn't, but either way, you've now trained yourself that the plan is optional, that the rules are flexible, that what you feel in the moment matters more than what you decided when you were calm. This is the cycle, and the cycle feeds on itself. Every time you break your plan, you weaken your trust in it. Every time you weaken your trust in it, it becomes easier to break it again. You start to believe deep down that you can't rely on yourself. And once you believe that, trading becomes almost impossible, because trading requires self-trust. It requires the ability to make a decision and stick to it, even when everything in you wants to do something else. So why does this happen? Why do intelligent, capable people who know better keep doing the thing they said they wouldn't do? The answer is simpler than you think, but it's not easy to accept. It happens because in the moment of the trade, you're not thinking about your long-term plan. You're thinking about your immediate emotional state. You're thinking about how you feel right now. And how you feel right now is almost always more powerful than what you know is right. Fear is the obvious one. Fear of missing out, fear of losing what you have, fear of being wrong, fear of looking foolish, fear of wasting time, fear of falling behind. Fear disguises itself in many ways. Sometimes it looks like urgency. Sometimes it looks like confidence. Sometimes it looks like logical reasoning, but underneath, it's fear. And fear doesn't care about your plan. Fear wants relief. It wants resolution. It wants the discomfort to stop right now. But fear isn't the only thing. There's also hope. Not the mature, patient kind of hope, the desperate kind. The kind that makes you believe that this one trade will change everything. That this is the moment where it all turns around. This hope makes you take trades you shouldn't take. It makes you hold trades you should exit. It makes you risk more than you should risk. Because if you don't, you might miss the thing that finally makes you feel successful. The thing that finally proves you're not wasting your time. And then there's ego. Ego is subtle. It doesn't announce itself, but it's there every time you think, I know better than the plan right now. Every time you think the plan doesn't account for this specific situation. Every time you think I can see something the plan can't see. Now, sometimes that's true. Plans need to evolve. But most of the time, it's ego. It's the part of you that doesn't want to be constrained, that doesn't want to follow rules, that wants to prove that you're special, that you're the exception, that you can figure it out on the fly. There's also something that doesn't get talked about enough, and that's the need for stimulation. Trading can be boring when you follow your plan. You wait, you watch, you do nothing. And doing nothing feels like you're not trading. It feels like you're wasting the day. So you create action, you create drama. You take trades that aren't there just to feel like you're doing something, just to feel alive in the market. And you tell yourself it's part of the plan, but it's not. It's just you trying to fill a void that trading was never meant to fill. Now here's where it gets really interesting. All of these things, fear, hope, ego, the need for stimulation, they don't operate in isolation. They feed each other. You take a trade out of fear. It doesn't work. Now, your ego is hurt. So you take another trade to prove you're not wrong. That doesn't work either. Now, you're desperate. Now, hope kicks in. You start believing in a recovery trade. And the whole thing spirals. Each emotion triggers the next, and before you know it, you're 3 bad decisions deep and you can't even remember what your plan was. And here's the part that really matters. In those moments, you're not thinking about your future self. You're not thinking about the trader you want to become. You're thinking about the person you are right now in this moment, trying to escape discomfort. And the person you are right now will almost always choose relief over growth. That's not a flaw. That's human nature. But it's also why you need a plan that accounts for human nature. Not a plan that pretends you're a robot. Let me tell you something that might be hard to hear. Your plan isn't the problem. I know it feels like maybe your plan is flawed or incomplete or not good enough. And maybe it does need refinement, but that's not why you're breaking it. You're breaking it because following it requires you to feel things you don't want to feel. It requires you to sit with uncertainty. It requires you to accept losses. It requires you to be patient when patience feels like torture. It requires you to do nothing when doing nothing feels like weakness. And those things are hard. They're harder than any technical analysis. They're harder than any strategy because they require you to confront yourself. The traders who succeed long-term aren't the ones with the best strategies. They're the ones who develop the ability to tolerate discomfort without reacting. They're the ones who can feel the fear and not let it dictate their actions. They're the ones who can feel the hope and not let it cloud their judgment. They're the ones who can feel the ego and not let it override their discipline. They've learned to separate feeling from action. And that is a skill. It's not something you're born with. It's something you build slowly over time through awareness. So how do you start to change this pattern? How do you stop trading against yourself? The first step is not what you think. The first step is not to try harder. The first step is to stop punishing yourself. Every time you break your plan and then beat yourself up about it, you're actually making the problem worse, because now you're associating trading with shame. And shame doesn't motivate change. Shame motivates hiding. Shame motivates quitting. Shame makes you want to prove yourself even more, which leads to more impulsive decisions. So the first thing you need to do is develop some compassion for yourself, not as an excuse, but as a foundation for change. When you break your plan, instead of asking, "Why am I so undisciplined?" ask, "What was I trying to solve in that moment? What need was I trying to meet? Was I trying to avoid feeling stupid? Was I trying to feel in control? Was I trying to make back a loss so I didn't have to face it?" Get curious about the real driver. Because once you see the real driver, you can address it directly instead of just fighting the symptom. The second thing is to understand that your plan is not just a set of rules, it's a relationship with yourself. Every time you follow it, you're building trust. Every time you break it, you're damaging trust. And just like any relationship, trust is built slowly and broken quickly. So you have to start small. You have to start with one rule that you can follow consistently, even when it's hard. Not 10 rules, not a perfect system, one thing. And you prove to yourself that you can do it. And then you add another. This is how you rebuild the relationship with yourself. The third thing is to separate the decision from the outcome. This is crucial. Your plan is not designed to win every trade. It's designed to keep you in the game long enough to let probability work in your favor. But if you judge every decision by its immediate outcome, you'll never trust the plan. Because sometimes the right decision loses. Sometimes the disciplined trade doesn't work. And if you can't accept that, you'll always be tempted to override the plan when things aren't going your way. You have to learn to measure yourself by whether you followed your process, not by whether the trade was profitable. That's the only measurement that's actually in your control. And finally, you need to accept that this is not a problem you solve once. This is a tension you manage forever. There will always be moments where you want to break your plan. There will always be trades that feel different, that feel special, that feel like exceptions. The goal is not to never feel that pull. The goal is to recognize it when it happens and choose differently anyway. To feel the urge and let it pass. To notice the thought and not believe it. To see the pattern starting and interrupt it before it takes over. You know, what's interesting is that the traders who struggle with this the most are often the ones who care the most. You break your plan because you want to succeed so badly. You want it to work so badly. You want to prove to yourself that you can do this. And that wanting, as pure as it is, becomes the thing that sabotages you. Because it makes every trade feel urgent. It makes every decision feel like it carries the weight of your entire future. And under that kind of pressure, your brain defaults to survival mode. It stops thinking long-term and starts reacting short-term. So part of the work is learning to hold your goals more lightly. Not to care less, but to carry the caring differently. To want success without needing it in this exact moment. To be committed without being desperate. To have a plan without clinging to it like it's the only thing keeping you afloat. There's a kind of relaxed focus that the best traders have. They care deeply, but they're not attached to any single outcome. They're playing a long game, and they know that today's trade is just one trade in thousands. That perspective changes everything. I want to come back to something I said earlier. When you trade against your plan, you're trying to solve a problem. And the reason this matters is because if you can identify the real problem, you can solve it in a healthier way. If the problem is that you feel behind, maybe the solution isn't a revenge trade. Maybe the solution is redefining what success looks like, so you're not constantly measuring yourself against some impossible standard. If the problem is that you need to feel in control, maybe the solution isn't forcing trades. Maybe the solution is finding control and following your process rather than in controlling the market. If the problem is that you can't tolerate uncertainty, maybe the solution isn't trying to eliminate uncertainty. Maybe the solution is learning to be okay with not knowing. See, most of the things you're trying to get from trading validation, control, certainty, relief, you can't actually get from trading. Not consistently, not in a healthy way. Trading will give you those things sometimes, but it will also take them away. And if you're dependent on trading to provide them, you'll always be at the mercy of the market. You'll always be one losing streak away from falling apart. The real work is learning to meet those needs outside of trading, so that when you come to the market, you're not desperate, you're not needy. You're just there to execute your plan and let the results be what they are. The market doesn't care about your excuses or your intentions. It only cares about your actions, and your actions reveal the truth of who you are in those moments. You built a plan for a reason. You built it because you knew that in the heat of the moment, you couldn't trust your emotions. You built it because you understood that trading requires structure. You built it to protect yourself from yourself. And now the work is to honor that. To trust that the person who built the plan knew something that the person in the moment forgets. To give yourself the gift of following through, not because you have to, but because you deserve the results that come from that kind of integrity. And maybe you won't get it right every time. Maybe you'll still break the plan sometimes. Maybe there will still be days where you look at your screen and feel that sinking feeling. But each time it happens, you'll understand it a little better. You'll see it a little sooner. You'll have a little more space between the impulse and the action. And slowly, over time, the pattern will shift. Not because you forced it, but because you finally understood what was underneath it. The truth is, you already know what you need to do. You've always known. You just haven't been able to do it consistently because you've been fighting the wrong battle. You've been trying to control your actions without understanding your motivations. You've been trying to change your behavior without changing your relationship to yourself. And that never works. Not in trading. Not in life. So this is where we end. Not with a challenge or a call to action, but with a simple invitation. To be honest with yourself. To see yourself clearly. To stop pretending that the problem is out there in the market. And to recognize that the problem and the solution have always been right here. In you. In your willingness to sit with what's uncomfortable. In your ability to choose differently. In your commitment to becoming the kind of person who can be trusted, especially by yourself. You don't need to trade against your plan. You never did. You just needed to understand why you were doing it, and now you do. What you do with that understanding is up to you. If this resonated with you, I'd appreciate you sharing it with another trader who might need to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.